Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to talk about some books I really loved reading when I was a teen. Last year I filmed a video that was all about books I read as a kid, childhood reads, just reflecting on those because I have a whole shelf on Goodreads where I had kept track of that stuff. And one of the comments that I received was from Natalie, and she asked if I could do something similar for books I read as a teen, because I seemed like a lot of people enjoyed sort of reliving that nostalgia of those books. And so I was really hoping I'd be able to film it last year when I went home for Christmas, but because of COVID, that didn't happen. However, it is now August 2021, and I am finally home visiting my family for the first time in 19 months or whatever. It's been a while. And I'm here in my childhood bedroom, and I actually have access to a lot of the books that I'm going to talk about today. So it was time to film this video. I have a bunch of different standalone books and series that I'm going to talk about. So if you were a teenager in the mid-2000s to late 2000s, you will probably recognize many of these books. The first books I'm going to talk about are part of a series. It's one of my favorite series of all time, and I read them for the first time when I was a teen, and that is the Gemma Doyle trilogy, which is made up of A Great and Terrible Beauty, Rebel Angels, and The Sweet Far Thing. I absolutely devoured these books when I was younger, and I did actually reread them, which is rare for me. I don't often reread books, but I did reread this series, and I still really enjoyed it. The series is about a 16-year-old girl named Gemma who goes to a boarding school, which, I mean, to an American girl, a boarding school sounds very exciting and elite, and she's British, and when she gets there, all these supernatural things start happening. She's got some sort of attachment to the supernatural, and this story is spread out through 3 books, with, you know, that final one being quite large. But man, I loved this story. Good memories with this series. This is one many of you will be familiar with, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants series. So Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, this first book, I read all of these, but this is definitely the one that sticks in my mind the most. The movie also came out in the mid-2000s, and I loved that movie. I cried every time I watched it, loved that movie. As far as the other books, there's the second summer of the Sisterhood, Girls in Pants, the third summer, and then there's also Forever in Blue, which is the fourth summer. There might be another book when they're older. Am I remembering that correctly? Haven't read that one, clearly. These books are actually sitting in my sister's room because I think she attempted to read them but didn't really get into them as much. But yeah, for me, it's definitely the first one that sticks with me. The second one, maybe a bit, and then the third and the fourth one, it says I read them on Goodreads, and honestly, I have no memory of doing that, but to be fair, it was a long time ago, so yeah. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Another one that I have to mention, even though I don't own it, is Noughts and Crosses by Malorie Blackman. This was a book in my freshman year of high school. They brought us to the library right at the beginning of the school year to kind of teach us about what was in the library, where it was, how we could ask for help, you know, just to make you feel comfortable in the school, which makes sense because freshmen were new to my high school. And one of the things they did was have us check out a book, and I decided to pick up Noughts and Crosses, just no idea what it was. I think the cover just intrigued me, and I read that book and it blew my mind a bit. 14-year-old me, her mind was blown a little bit, just because in that book, the situation that we're used to in our world has been reversed, where Black people are the ones that are in charge and white people were slaves, and that has just recently ended, and there's a relationship between a character, you know, you got that kind of Romeo and Juliet thing where one from one side, one from the other, and they fall for each other. And although I don't remember really the plot of that book, I never read any of the other books from that series, the thing that sticks with me is when they talked about how Band-Aids were not available in lighter colors because Black people were the ones who were running things, and so the Band-Aids were darker shades of color. And so if you were a white person and you wore a Band-Aid, you could really notice it. And I realized that I never saw darker colored Band-Aids ever. And I don't know if that's just because I grew up in a very white state or if they just didn't make them, but that little fact has stuck with me all these years. I'm 29 now, and that's like the thing that I remember from that book is the comment about the Band-Aids. And so for that reason, I really have to mention it because it is something that I think about every once in a while. So thanks, Malorie Blackman, for blowing my mind at 14. Girlfriend in a Coma by Douglas Copeland is another book that I read around this time and really enjoyed. The thing is, I barely remember the plot now. I just remember the feelings that this book gave me, and it sucked me in. It was the first Douglas Copeland book that I picked up. I was just very into this white cover with the little body in the bed and a little heart, like a little hospital bed. And this caused me to read other Douglas Copeland books, none of which I loved as much as this one. And his writing can definitely be a bit quirky and whatnot. So I'm a bit afraid to reread this now because I'm not sure if I would like it as much. But back in the day, this book just really stuck with me. And of course it has a really nice cover too. So it definitely, sticks around on my bookshelves. I also read books by Dan Brown when I was a teen. The Da Vinci Code came out when I was in middle school, and I listened to that on CD. So that kind of counts because I was probably in my early teens, or 11, 12 when I was listening to that. And then I also decided to read Digital Fortress and Deception Point, and then I did read Angels and Demons as well. I don't know if there was any other books out by him at that point, but I read all of those, and I remember being 15 and sitting in class and reading Digital Fortress and Deception Point. So those are definitely books I read as a teen, kind of those adventure, suspense almost. I mean, I guess like a thriller adventure books, and I just really latched on to that at that age. I think now there's definitely a certain part of me that likes that too, but I don't think I like Dan Brown's writing as much as I used to as a teen. So those are definitely books that I don't think I'll ever reread, but I have fond memories of sitting in class and being sucked into those books during like the half-hour reading time that they would sometimes give us in high school. A big series that I want to mention is the Bubbles Yablonsky series. This is probably one that many of you have not heard of. These are actually books for adults, but I read them when I was a teen. I saw Bubbles Unbound probably at Borders and was just really into this shiny cover with the sunglasses. These are murder mystery books. They're almost like cozy mysteries. Our main character, Bubbles, is a hairdresser who likes to snap gum and wear cute outfits, but she also can kick ass because she's kind of like going after these bad guys and whatnot. And yeah, there's 6 books that all kind of follow that trajectory of here's this like Barbie-like girl who's solving mysteries and is actually really cool. So that was probably some pretty decent representation back then, to have someone that was super girly, who was really wanted to wear her heels and makeup and have her hair done and everything, but she also was like after the bad guy. And I'm sure I would find some probably slightly problematic things if I read it now, but as a teen, these were super fun, and they're just little mass market paperbacks. So if this is a familiar series to any of you, I would love to know if you read this at all. Being adult books, probably you didn't read them as a teen, but yeah, that first cover really was attractive to me at that age, and then I ended up buying and reading all 6 of the books in the series. This book will definitely be familiar to some of you. It's TTYL by Lauren Miracle. This book was super popular for a while, I feel like, and there is at least TTFN, which I know I read, but I don't own. I only own the first one. These books were written as if the characters were sending messages to each other, like on AOL Messenger, because that was a thing back then. So it's kind of like that. The entire story is told over Messenger, and you have the little like emoji icon things on the cover, which made it very, very catchy. It has one of those like flip out covers. So yeah, this book, I love it, and I love the spine too. Obviously I've kept it around. I don't remember anything about the plot, but I just remember this being super fun, and I feel like this was one of the first books that sort of embraced that idea of internet, like showing characters talking over the internet rather than in person, and really embracing that internet culture. So this is a fun book to see on my shelves and just be reminded of that time in my life. This next series is one that I know I used to have all 4 of the books, and maybe I gave them to my sister and she gave them away or something because I can't find them anywhere. But it's The Face on the Milk Carton series by Caroline B. Cooney. It took me a really long time to read this series. I had all of the books for a bit, and then I finally picked up the first one and got sucked into the series. But the premise is that this girl is looking at a milk carton, and before I was in school, they used to put on milk cartons the faces of missing children and information about them, and the main character is looking at a milk carton one day and she realizes that the picture is her. And so she finds out that she has potentially been kidnapped as a kid, and like as a little kid, and she doesn't know it. And so that obviously creates a pretty intense story. And they were not big books, but man, I really got sucked into this story, and that's just the kind of story that I enjoy, like that sort of thriller, intense, you don't know what's going to happen. And at that point in time, like I hadn't really read a lot of books like that, so reading that series was really fun for me. The next series is the Holiday series by Kate Can. I loved these books, and these colors probably look familiar to you because these books usually sit right here on my bookshelves. I would read these in the summer. We would every year go on vacation, and my family, and I would read one of these books during that time. I feel like I liked Grecian and Spanish Holiday the best. At this point, I don't remember the exact stories and how they played out, but they have such fun, bright covers, and they all follow the same theme, even though they follow different characters. And I was just sucked into these, probably because I love travel, and it was just like the perfect thing to read at that time. I feel like if I reread them now, I probably wouldn't love them as much, but definitely holding on to these for the like happy memories that it brings me, and the fact that I just loved them so much. Another standalone book is A Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. I read this definitely in my early teens, and this book was just amazing to me. This is a book that I would really like to reread, and I didn't have the physical copy with me when I did a video about books I wanted to reread, but I noticed that this was given the Schneider Family Book Award, and which is honoring artistic expression of the disability experience, which I didn't even like know until I looked back at this and like registered that it was given this award, because the main character has synesthesia, where they associate colors with sounds and things like that. And so she has, for example, she has a cat named Mango, and everybody thinks that she's named the cat Mango because of the cat's eye color, but it's actually because when her cat purrs or meows, makes noises, she sees kind of this like mango yellow orange color that comes with those sounds. And this taught me about synesthesia. I had no idea that was a thing at that time, and I loved this book so much. So much that I still hold on to it and would like to reread it now as an adult to see how it reads at this point. But she just goes on this journey of like people finding out that she has synesthesia and kind of what that means for her, because it's a thing that a lot of people I feel like aren't even aware exists, but it was dealt with really well in this story. This next one is the Mediator series, which was actually written by Meg Cabot, but the first few books were published under a pen name of Jenny Carroll, I believe. I have a note here. Yes, Jenny Carroll. I got the first few books from the series from the library, never owned them. And I really thought it was so cool. It was about this girl who could communicate with ghosts and how that messed with her life. And it's one of those series that I would love to reread them or try and finish the whole series, because I only read the first few and I just can't find them anywhere. But yeah, I just thought this idea was so cool. And I think, like Meg Cabot does, it probably did a good job of mixing high school life with that sort of undead ghostly experience. So if you guys have read this series, and if you have the full set and it's like these covers or whatever, do you remember where you got them? Did you buy them semi-recently? It would be cool for me to be able to find them, and I don't even necessarily need to own them. I think it would just be a really fun read to actually go into the series and read them all the way through. I've got 2 series left that I want to mention. I definitely read a lot of series when I was in my teens. I do not read nearly as many series now. I also read way more nonfiction, which usually isn't in a series format, but I have to mention Twilight. I know many of you are probably sick of hearing about these books because there's a lot of problematic content in them, and Midnight Sun came out and everything. I did not get Midnight Sun. I did not read it. I don't care that much about them, but I have to mention the fact that I was in on the hype when Eclipse and Breaking Dawn came out. I think Eclipse had just come out when I got into them. My friend got me into them, and obviously I own a full set. And these books were the kind of books that suck you in, and as a teen, I definitely did not see and recognize some of the issues that the book has, because it's something that kind of over time as a society we've been better about recognizing. But yeah, this series sucks you in. And I even reread the series right after I graduated high school because after the first couple movies came out, people were shitting on the series. And I was like, if I read them again, I'm curious to see if I don't like it as much. And I actually really enjoyed it still, the actual reading experience. So this was probably when I was like 18, 19 that I reread them. It's been 10 years since then, and I don't know if I'll ever reread them again. It would definitely be for the nostalgia of it and the fact that it's like a super fast-paced read. But man, when we went to go see Twilight in theaters when it came out in 2008, like that book and that movie, just there's such a level of nostalgia mixed in with it, which sucks because obviously, you know, there's some issues in there, and I totally get that. But I also understand why some people, you know, have a hard time letting it go because of that nostalgia factor. So definitely read and enjoyed Twilight when I was a teen. And finally, the last series that I want to mention, the one that's going to close out this whole video, is the Princess Diaries series by Meg Cabot. I read the entire series of this, all the main books, all the little books. I got them all from the library. I definitely read the first few multiple times. I saw both of the movies. I owned the soundtrack to the second one. I might even have it still. Yep, I still have the CD for The Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement because I loved those movies so much, had such a good time with them, and although the books and the movies are very different, you can enjoy them for different reasons, right? So yeah, I read the entire series. Les is also a really big fan of this series, and I believe she was rereading them, or at least is in the process of rereading them. I don't know if I necessarily go and reread them right now, maybe someday, but this was definitely a big thing when I was growing up and getting into those books and rereading the first few many times. Every time another one would come out, I would reread a chunk of the old ones because they were just so fast to read because they were just diary entries and they weren't that big. It was just such a great series to read as a teen girl. I'm sure some of you watching this video have read some of these individual books or these series, so let me know which ones you also were into when you were a teen. If you've reread any of them as an adult, let me know what you thought of them at that point in time. We'll just share in the nostalgia and the love for books that we read in our teen years. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.